You're sitting around a campfire, marshmallows slowly turning golden over the flames, when someone leans forward and says, "Did you hear about the couple who was parked at Lover's Lane?" Everyone goes quiet. You know what's coming. Another urban legend. But here's the thing, even though you've heard it before, even though you know it's not real, you still feel that little chill run down your spine. Welcome back to Midnight Deep Dive. If you're new here, welcome to our cozy corner of the internet, where we explore the stories that have captivated human imagination for generations. Wherever you are right now, I'm so glad you've decided to join me for this journey. Tonight, we're diving into the world of urban legends. Those stories that your friend's cousin's neighbor swears actually happened, tales that spread through whispers and chain emails and late-night forums. From phantom hitchhikers to stolen organs, from haunted mirrors to mysterious elevator rituals, urban legends adapt and evolve, but they never quite disappear. So settle into your most comfortable position, let your breathing deepen, and join me as we explore 10 urban legends that have captured imaginations across decades and continents. Our journey begins with a lonely stretch of highway, where a young woman in a white dress stands waiting for someone to offer her a ride home. There's a stretch of highway outside almost every town where locals will tell you to never pick up hitchhikers. Not because of danger from criminals, but because of something stranger. The story goes like this. You're driving home late at night when you see a young woman standing by the roadside, sometimes in a white dress, sometimes in modern clothes, always alone. Being a good person, you pull over and offer her a ride. She gets in, tells you an address, and sits quietly in the backseat as you drive. You try to make conversation, but she gives only short answers. When you glance in the rearview mirror, she's staring out the window with an expression of infinite sadness. You arrive at the address she gave, usually a house in an old neighborhood. You turn to tell her you've arrived, and she's gone. Vanished. The backseat is empty, the door still closed and locked. Confused and unsettled, you knock on the door of the house. An elderly person answers, and when you describe your passenger, their face goes pale. "That's my daughter," they say. "She died 20 years ago on that stretch of road. You're the 7th person this year who's given her a ride home." This legend in various forms appears across virtually every culture that has cars and roads. In some versions, the hitchhiker is a young man, in others an old woman. Sometimes they leave behind a piece of clothing, a scarf, a jacket, that turns out to belong to someone long dead. In Hawaii, the hitchhiker is the goddess Peel, who tests the kindness of drivers. In Japan, it's a woman in white who died in a traffic accident. In Mexican tradition, it's La Llorona, the weeping woman searching for her drowned children. The legend's persistence across cultures suggests it taps into something universal. But where did it begin? Folklorists have traced versions of this story back centuries, long before automobiles existed. Medieval European folklore includes tales of travelers who encountered mysterious figures on roads who would disappear, later revealed to be souls in purgatory or recently deceased travelers. As transportation evolved from walking to horses to carriages to automobiles, the legend adapted while maintaining its essential structure. The first systematic study of the Vanishing Hitchhiker was conducted by American folklorist Richard Beardsley in 1942. He collected dozens of versions from across the United States, noticing patterns in how the story was told and spread. Most versions placed the encounter on a specific local road, often one with a history of fatal accidents. The ghost was almost always young and died tragically. And crucially, the person telling the story always heard it from someone who knew someone who experienced it. It was never firsthand. This friend of a friend quality is a hallmark of urban legends. The story is close enough to seem credible but distant enough that you can't actually verify it. It's always someone else's experience, someone else's testimony, creating a perpetual chain of plausibility without proof. But why does this particular legend resonate so powerfully? On the surface, it's a ghost story, and people have always loved ghost stories. But The Vanishing Hitchhiker touches on deeper psychological territory. It's about our relationship with death, with memory, with the roads we travel both literally and metaphorically. The hitchhiker is always trying to go home. This is crucial. They're not malevolent spirits seeking revenge or trying to cause harm. They're lost souls trying to return to a place of safety and love. This makes them sympathetic figures rather than pure horror. We feel sad for them, even as we're unnerved by their supernatural nature. The legend acknowledges that death might not be the absolute ending we fear or hope for, that some part of us might continue, still seeking connection and home. The driver's role in the story is equally important. By stopping to help, by showing kindness to a stranger, the driver becomes part of a story larger than themselves. They've brushed against the supernatural, been chosen somehow to help a soul on its eternal journey home. There's something almost sacred in that encounter, despite its frightening aspects. The legend rewards kindness, even as it delivers a scare. The specific detail about the hitchhiker sitting in the backseat is particularly clever. This means the driver can't see them clearly, can't make firm eye contact, can't establish the kind of connection that would make the disappearance even more shocking. The rearview mirror becomes a liminal space. You're seeing them but not directly, they're present but separated, real but somehow distant. When they vanish, that distance suddenly makes terrible sense. Different versions of the legend include different explanatory details. Sometimes the hitchhiker leaves behind proof of their existence, that scarf or jacket. Sometimes they predict disaster or deliver warnings about the future. In some versions, they ask to be taken to a cemetery rather than a house, only vanishing when the car pulls up to a specific grave. Each variation adds its own emotional color to the basic structure. The legend also reflects anxieties about roads themselves. Highways are liminal spaces, neither here nor there, places of transition and movement. They're where we're most likely to encounter strangers, most vulnerable to the unexpected. Fatal accidents on roads create traumatic associations with specific locations. The Vanishing Hitchhiker legend gives form to the unease we feel passing accident sites, the ghostly quality of empty roads at night, the way highways can feel haunted by all the journeys they've witnessed. In modern times, the legend has adapted to reflect changing social attitudes. Picking up hitchhikers, once a common act of kindness, is now considered risky behavior. This adds another layer to the story. In helping the hitchhiker, the driver is violating modern safety wisdom, which makes the supernatural payoff feel like cosmic consequence. The legend now serves as a cautionary tale about trusting strangers, even as it rewards the driver's compassion. Some researchers have investigated whether any real incidents might have sparked specific versions of the legend. They've found tantalizing possibilities. Unsolved disappearances of young women, accidents where bodies were never recovered, historical figures who died tragically and became subjects of local ghost lore. But these real tragedies, if they exist, have been so thoroughly absorbed into the legend that separating fact from fiction becomes impossible. The Vanishing Hitchhiker has influenced popular culture extensively. Movies, television shows, and books have used variations of this legend, sometimes playing it straight, sometimes subverting expectations. The legend's flexibility, its ability to adapt to different settings and contexts while maintaining emotional impact, makes it perfect for storytelling across media. It's a warm summer night in the late 1950s. A teenage couple drives to a secluded spot known locally as Lover's Lane, a quiet road overlooking town where young people go to be alone. The boy fiddles with the radio dial until he finds music, and they settle in for an evening of conversation and innocent romance. Then a news bulletin interrupts the program. A dangerous criminal has escaped from the nearby state mental institution. The announcer's voice is grave. The escapee is particularly dangerous. He's missing one hand, which has been replaced with a hook. Police are advising residents to stay indoors and lock their doors. The girl becomes nervous, asking her boyfriend to take her home. He's frustrated. They've just arrived, and besides, they're perfectly safe in a locked car. But she insists, her unease growing as every shadow outside the windows seems to move. Finally, annoyed but compliant, he starts the car and speeds away, tires kicking up gravel. When they arrive at her house, he walks around to open her door. There, hanging from the door handle, is a bloody hook. This legend, known as the Hook, or the Hook Man, became one of America's most famous urban legends during the 1950s and 60s, spreading through high schools and college campuses with remarkable speed. It perfectly captured the anxieties of post-war American youth culture. The tension between teenage independence and parental authority, the fear of violence disrupting suburban safety, and the complex attitudes toward teenage sexuality that define the era. The story's basic structure appears in countless variations. Sometimes the couple hears scratching on the car roof. Sometimes they see a shadowy figure approaching. Sometimes they hear a radio report that the escapee was last seen in their specific area. But the core elements remain consistent. Young couple, isolated location, escaped criminal with distinctive deformity, narrow escape, and the shocking evidence of danger that was closer than they realized. The legend emerged during a specific historical moment. The 1950s saw dramatic changes in American teenage culture. Young people had more independence, more access to automobiles, and more privacy than previous generations. The concept of dating, as we know it, was relatively new, and it caused significant anxiety among parents who worried about what their teenagers were doing in those parked cars at Lover's Lane. The Hook Man legend functioned as a cautionary tale with multiple messages. For parents and authority figures, it validated concerns about teenage sexuality and independence. See what dangers await when young people ignore warnings and seek privacy. For teenagers, it was a thrilling story that acknowledged their desire for independence while also justifying parental rules. The legend navigated both sides of the generational divide. The specific detail of the hook is psychologically brilliant. Hooks have appeared in folklore and fairy tales for centuries as symbols of danger and violence. Captain Hook in Peter Pan, the hook in numerous fishing and hunting metaphors, the hooking motion as a way to grab and capture. The hook replacing a hand creates a figure who is both human and monstrous, someone who has been marked and changed by violence, who now carries that violence as part of their body. The escaped mental patient element reflects 1950s attitudes toward mental health and institutionalization. Large state mental institutions housed thousands of patients in often poor conditions, and escapes did occasionally occur. The legend exaggerated these occasional escapes into a persistent threat, tapping into fears about dangerous lunatics roaming free. This aspect of the legend hasn't aged well, as it reinforces harmful stigmas about mental illness, but it reveals the specific anxieties of its era. The Lover's Lane setting is crucial. These were real places, usually on the outskirts of town, where teenagers went specifically to have privacy away from parental supervision. They were liminal spaces, not quite in town but not quite out in the wilderness, not public but not private, sanctioned enough to be well known but unofficial enough to feel slightly transgressive. The legend turned these spaces of teenage freedom into spaces of danger. The radio announcement device is particularly clever. It brings the threat directly into the car, transforming what should be a space of safety and control into something vulnerable. The couple can't ignore the information. They hear it in real time, forcing them to make an immediate decision. Do they stay or go, trust in their safety or heed the warning? The girl's intuition that they should leave is validated by the ending, but only after the boy initially dismisses her fears. This gendered dynamic appears in most versions. The girl is frightened and wants to leave. The boy is frustrated and wants to stay. This reflects 1950s gender roles where girls were expected to be the guardians of sexual propriety while boys pushed boundaries. The legend implicitly supports the girl's position. Her instinct to leave saves them, and the boy's desire to stay nearly gets them hooked, literally. Yet the legend also portrays the girl's fear as somewhat irrational until it's validated by evidence, maintaining some ambiguity about whose judgment should be trusted. The ending's shock value lies in the physical evidence. The hook on the door handle proves the danger was real and immediate. The killer was right there, within touching distance, close enough to grab the door as they drove away. The couple's narrow escape becomes visceral and concrete. That hanging hook becomes a trophy of survival and a reminder of vulnerability. Something they can point to and say, "This really happened." Folklorists have never found a verified incident matching the legend's basic facts. No police reports document an escaped mental patient with a hook attacking couples at Lover's Lane. No hospital records confirm such an escape. No news archives validate the radio announcements. Yet the legend persists as something that really happened to someone, somewhere, somehow. The legend's spread was aided by its structural perfection as a story. It has clear narrative arc, building tension, visceral climax, and shocking ending. It can be told in just a few minutes, making it perfect for campfires, slumber parties, and car rides. It requires no complex setup or character development. Anyone can tell it, and it works every time. As American culture changed through the 1960s and 70s, the Hook Man legend adapted slightly, but retained its power. The specific fears about teenagers and cars shifted, but new anxieties replaced them. The legend could accommodate concerns about drug use, serial killers, or satanic cults simply by adjusting the nature of the escaped criminal. The basic structure remained flexible enough to channel whatever dangers each generation feared most. Horror films recognized the legend's power and incorporated variations of it. The 1997 film, I Know What You Did Last Summer, features a killer with a hook. The urban legend film franchise from the late 1990s explicitly explored this and other urban legends as horror movie premises. The 2021 Candyman reboot includes hook imagery tied directly to urban legend traditions. The legend influenced horror cinema, which in turn reinforced the legend's place in popular culture. Today, Lover's Lane culture has largely faded. Teenagers have different ways of finding privacy, and societal attitudes toward teenage sexuality have evolved, though anxiety about it certainly hasn't disappeared. Yet the Hook Man legend persists, told to new generations who may not even have context for Lover's Lanes, but still respond to the story's fundamental terror. The danger that gets close enough to touch you, the narrow escape you don't realize was narrow until you see the evidence. Stand in a darkened bathroom lit only by a candle. Look at yourself in the mirror. Say Bloody Mary 3 times. Some versions say 13 times. Some say you must spin between repetitions. All agree on one thing. Something will appear in the mirror behind you, and it won't be friendly. This ritual has terrified adolescents for generations, a rite of passage performed at slumber parties and dares, born from equal parts curiosity and courage. But who is Bloody Mary? Where did this legend come from? And why do so many people claim to have seen something in that mirror? The legend's origins are murky and multiple, with various historical figures proposed as the real Bloody Mary. The most common candidate is Queen Mary I of England, who ruled from 1553 to 1558. A devout Catholic, she attempted to reverse England's Protestant Reformation, resulting in the persecution and execution of numerous Protestants. She earned the nickname Bloody Mary from these religious killings, though the nickname was applied posthumously by Protestant historians, not during her lifetime. But Mary Tudor's connection to the mirror legend is tenuous at best. She never appeared in mirrors during life, and her ghost wasn't associated with bathroom rituals until centuries after her death. The name likely attached to the legend because Bloody Mary simply sounds sinister and memorable, not because of any genuine connection to the historical queen. Another proposed origin involves Mary Worth, though here the legend fractures into multiple contradictory versions. In some tellings, Mary Worth was a witch executed in the colonial era who vowed revenge from beyond the grave. In others, she was a woman who died in a car accident, her face hideously scarred. In still others, she was a young mother whose child was taken from her, driving her mad with grief. These variations suggest that Mary Worth is more a convenient name than a historical figure. Mary being an extremely common name, and Worth perhaps playing on the idea of whether summoning her is worth the risk. Some versions associate Bloody Mary with Mary I's mother, Anne Boleyn, who was beheaded by Henry VII. Anne's ghost supposedly haunts various English castles and might have become conflated with the mirror legend. Other versions reference Mary Magdalene, the biblical figure, though her connection is even more historically dubious. The truth is that the Bloody Mary legend probably doesn't derive from any single historical figure. Instead, it represents a folk tradition that accumulated various names and backstories as it spread, each community and generation adding its own details. The ritual itself, summoning a spirit through a mirror using repetitive incantation, draws from much older magical traditions that long predate any specific Mary. Mirrors have held supernatural significance across cultures for centuries. They were seen as liminal objects that existed between the physical and spiritual worlds. In many traditions, mirrors were covered during thunderstorms to prevent attracting lightning, or after someone died to prevent their soul from being trapped in the reflective surface. Scrying, using mirrors or other reflective surfaces for divination, appears in numerous magical traditions worldwide. The bathroom setting is crucial to the legend's effectiveness. Bathrooms are liminal spaces within homes, private, isolated, associated with vulnerability and bodily functions. They're often small, with harsh lighting that can be completely controlled. The combination of isolation, controlled lighting, and a large mirror creates perfect conditions for the ritual. Adding to this, bathrooms often have particular acoustic properties that make sounds echo strangely, adding to the eerie atmosphere. The ritual's psychological effectiveness has been studied by researchers interested in hallucinations and perceptual distortions. When you stare at your own face in dim light, especially while in an anxious or suggestible state, your visual perception begins to distort. This phenomenon, called the strange face illusion, occurs because your visual system adapts to the low light and begins to misinterpret shadows and subtle features. The brain's face recognition systems are extraordinarily sensitive. We're programmed to see faces even where none exist, a tendency called pareidolia. When staring at a face in dim light, especially after repetitive chanting that induces a mild trance state, these face recognition systems begin to malfunction in specific ways. People report seeing their faces morph and distort, features becoming exaggerated or monstrous. Sometimes they see other faces entirely, family members, strangers, or horrifying inhuman visages. This neurological explanation doesn't diminish the experience's emotional impact. When you see your reflection distort into something monstrous, your rational knowledge that it's an optical illusion provides little comfort. The experience feels completely real, visceral, and terrifying. Your heart races, adrenaline floods your system, and the memory of what you saw remains vividly disturbing. The legend's persistence through generations speaks to its effectiveness as both social ritual and personal challenge. For adolescents navigating questions of courage, peer pressure, and identity, the Bloody Mary ritual provides a relatively safe context for confronting fear. You choose to participate, you control the conditions, and you can stop at any time by simply leaving the bathroom or turning on the lights. Yet despite this control, the fear feels real. The slumber party context is particularly significant. Adolescent slumber parties serve important social functions. They're spaces where young people experiment with independence, test boundaries, and navigate peer relationships. Rituals like Bloody Mary become ways of demonstrating bravery, creating shared experiences, and establishing group bonds. The person who successfully completes the ritual gains status. The person who refuses or flays too quickly might face teasing. Different versions of the legend include various additional elements. Some require spinning between repetitions. Some specify using a particular number of candles. Some say you must be alone. Others allow witnesses outside the bathroom. Some versions claim Bloody Mary will scratch your face or pull you into the mirror. Others say she simply appears and screams. The variations allow each group to customize the ritual, making it feel more authentic and immediate. The legend has adapted to modern contexts remarkably well. In the age of smartphones and social media, videos of people attempting the Bloody Mary ritual proliferate online. These videos usually show darkened bathrooms, nervous participants, and either genuinely frightened reactions or staged jump scares. The legend has found new life through digital sharing, introducing it to generations who might not experience traditional slumber parties, but still seek that controlled thrill of supernatural encounter. Interestingly, the Bloody Mary legend has variations in other cultures with different names but similar structures. In Hispanic tradition, there's a similar ritual involving La Llorona or other female spirits. In Japanese culture, similar mirror-based summoning rituals exist, though with different spirits and slightly different procedures. This suggests that the basic concept, summoning something through mirrors using repetitive incantation, resonates across cultural boundaries. The legend also reflects deeper anxieties about identity and reflection. Mirrors show us ourselves, but that reflection is always reversed, always other, always somehow not quite us. The Bloody Mary ritual plays on this unease about the gap between self and reflection. What if that reflection gained independence? What if something else looked back at you through your own eyes? The legend transforms the mirror from a tool of vanity into a portal of horror. You're traveling alone in a foreign city, maybe for business, maybe for a vacation. You meet someone attractive in a hotel bar. They're charming, interesting, and after a few drinks, they suggest going somewhere more private. You agree, feeling lucky and adventurous. You have another drink in their room, then everything goes black. You wake up in a bathtub filled with ice, groggy and disoriented. There's a sharp pain in your lower back. Next to the tub is a note. Don't move. Call 911. We have removed one of your kidneys. You reach behind you and feel bandages. Your phone is nearby. The police, when they arrive, tell you grimly that you're the latest victim of an organ harvesting ring. This legend, known as the kidney heist or the organ theft legend, exploded across the world in the 1990s and has proven remarkably resistant to debunking despite no verified cases ever being documented. It taps into multiple anxieties about travel, about trusting strangers, about the vulnerability of our bodies, and about the dark side of medical technology. The legend's first documented appearance in its modern form was in 1991, when rumors began circulating about tourists in Latin America waking up minus kidneys. By 1997, the story had evolved into its classic form and spread globally through email chains. The State Department received so many inquiries about kidney theft that they issued an official statement. No such crime had ever been verified. This official denial, rather than ending the legend, actually reinforced it for many believers. Of course, the government would cover it up to protect tourism. The basic structure of the legend includes several key elements: a traveler away from home, an attractive stranger offering companionship, drinks that lead to unconsciousness, waking up in ice with surgical evidence of organ removal and a warning note. The ice is always emphasized. It's clinically detailed and somehow makes the story feel more plausible, as if the criminals were professional enough to preserve the victim, but compassionate enough to leave them alive. Why did this legend spread so effectively? The timing is crucial. The 1990s saw dramatic developments in organ transplantation technology. Immunosuppressive drugs became more effective, making transplants more successful. This created desperate demand for organs, with waiting lists growing longer as more people became eligible for transplants. The gap between organ supply and demand created an atmosphere where illegal organ trafficking seemed not just plausible, but almost inevitable. Real organ trafficking does exist, though it looks nothing like the legend. The World Health Organization estimates that about 10% of organ transplants worldwide involve organs obtained through illegal means. However, these black market organs are obtained through coercion of vulnerable people in desperate circumstances, not through random drugging and surgery. The victims are typically impoverished individuals who are pressured or misled into selling organs, or in some cases, organs are taken from prisoners or victims of violence. The legend's version of organ theft is actually medically implausible for numerous reasons. Kidney removal requires a sterile surgical environment, specialized equipment, a trained surgical team, and several hours of careful procedure. The operation can't be performed in a hotel room or back alley, and the victim couldn't simply wake up afterward. They would require significant postoperative care. Blood type compatibility must be established before removing an organ, as organs must be matched to recipients quickly. The legendary spontaneous theft makes no medical sense. Furthermore, organs deteriorate rapidly outside the body. A kidney needs to be transplanted within 24 to 36 hours of removal, which means the entire operation. Theft, transport, matching to recipient, and transplant surgery would need to be coordinated with precision. The ice bath, while a memorable detail, wouldn't preserve an organ for transplantation. The whole scenario, from a medical logistics perspective, is essentially impossible. Yet the legend persists, adapted to various contexts. In some versions, the victim is a business traveler in a major American city rather than a tourist abroad, bringing the threat home. In others, it's a child who goes missing at an amusement park, later found with organs missing. Sometimes it's both kidneys, sometimes a kidney and other organs, sometimes just eyes or corneas, which have similar implausibility issues but sound more believable because they're smaller. The legend reflects several cultural anxieties beyond just medical fears. It embodies xenophobia and fear of foreign travel, particularly in versions set in Latin America, Asia, or Eastern Europe. The attractive stranger who offers companionship becomes a lure into danger, playing on fears about casual intimacy and trusting outsiders. For women, the legend resonates with anxieties about drinks being spiked and vulnerability in social situations. The economic dimension is also significant. Kidneys are valuable. A black market kidney might be worth $200,000 or more. The legend reflects anxiety about being reduced to component parts, about our bodies having monetary value that someone might literally kill or maim us to obtain. In an era of increasing medical commercialization and debates about organ sales, this fear has particular resonance. Interestingly, the kidney heist legend has international variations that reflect local concerns. In India, where there have been real cases of coerced organ donations, the legend takes forms closer to reality. Poor people being tricked into surgeries rather than tourists being randomly attacked. In China, rumors persist about execution prisoners having organs harvested, which, while horrific and partially documented, differs from the spontaneous theft of the American version. The legend has influenced popular culture extensively. Episodes of television crime dramas have featured kidney theft plots, usually with disclaimers that such crimes don't actually occur but make dramatic narratives. The film Dirty Pretty Things, 2002, explored illegal organ trafficking in a more realistic way, showing how vulnerable immigrants might be exploited. The legend appears in horror films, novels, and even video games, becoming a standard trope of urban danger. Despite repeated debunkings by the State Department, FBI, National Kidney Foundation, and numerous journalists and researchers, the legend continues to spread. This persistence reveals something important about how urban legends function. They're not really about factual truth, they're about emotional truth. The kidney heist legend expresses genuine fears about vulnerability, about the medical-industrial complex, about what happens when we're unconscious and unable to protect ourselves. The legend also demonstrates how modern anxieties require modern monsters. Traditional folklore had vampires and werewolves who wanted your blood or body. The kidney heist legend creates contemporary monsters, criminals with surgical skills operating in networks, motivated by profit rather than supernatural hunger. They're scarier in some ways because they're plausible. We know organized crime exists, we know illegal markets exist, we know medical knowledge can be used for evil purposes. The most disturbing aspect of the legend might be its aftermath. In most versions, the victim survives. They wake up, call for help, and presumably recover with one kidney remaining. Humans can live normally with one kidney, but they're marked, violated, permanently altered. The legend isn't about death. It's about being used, being seen as valuable only for what can be taken from you. That violation feels more personal and disturbing than many traditional horror scenarios. The phone rings. The babysitter answers, expecting it to be the children's parents checking in from their dinner party. Instead, a male voice, raspy and strange, says simply, "Have you checked the children?" Then he hangs up. She's unsettled but assumes it's a prank call. She returns to watching television downstairs. 20 minutes later, the phone rings again. The same voice, "Have you checked the children?" She hangs up, genuinely frightened now. She goes upstairs and peers into the children's room. They're sleeping peacefully, undisturbed. When the phone rings a third time, she's terrified. "Have you checked the children?" the voice asks again. She hangs up and immediately calls the operator in older versions or 911, explaining the threatening calls. They tell her to keep him on the line if he calls again, so they can trace the call. The phone rings again. "It's time to check the children," the voice says. She keeps him talking, asking who he is, what he wants. After a few agonizing minutes, her phone rings again, but it's the operator or police. Their voice is urgent. "Get out of the house immediately." The calls are coming from the upstairs extension. She runs for the door just as a man appears at the top of the stairs, knife in hand. She escapes, and police arrive to find him still in the house, standing over the children's beds. Sometimes the children are safe, sometimes they're already dead, but always the horror is the same. The killer was inside the house the entire time, making calls from the very room where the children slept. This legend, often called the babysitter and the man upstairs, became widespread in the 1960s and 70s, terrifying babysitters and parents alike. Its effectiveness lies in its violation of domestic security. The home, supposed to be the safest space, becomes a trap. The upstairs, where children sleep and should be most protected, harbors the greatest danger. The legend draws from real tragic events, though none match the exact details of the story. In 1950, Janet Christman, a babysitter in Columbia, Missouri, was murdered in the home where she was working. In 1967, the case of Janet Christman inspired a television film called The Intruder, which helped popularize the babysitter in danger narrative. Throughout the 1960s and 70s, several highly publicized crimes against babysitters occurred, creating genuine anxiety about the vulnerability of young women left alone in others' homes. The legend's structure is psychologically brilliant. The phone calls create escalating tension, moving from unsettling to frightening to terrifying. The repeated phrase, "Have you checked the children?" serves multiple purposes. It suggests the caller knows there are children present, establishing surveillance and intention. It implies the children are in danger, creating urgency, and it shifts responsibility to the babysitter, making her wonder if she's been neglectful, if something has already happened that she hasn't noticed. The act of checking on the children becomes a terrible dilemma. Should she go upstairs and look, potentially encountering the threat? Or should she stay downstairs in the false security of not knowing? The legend forces the babysitter, and by extension, listeners, to confront the impossible position of choosing between ignorance and potentially deadly knowledge. The revelation that the calls come from inside the house is the story's masterstroke. It recontextualizes everything that came before. The caller wasn't outside looking in. He was upstairs the entire time. He had access to the children throughout. His calls weren't threats of what he might do. They were taunts about what he was already doing. The babysitter's sense of security was always illusory. This twist resonates because it violates our basic assumptions about home security. We lock doors, we check windows, we secure perimeters. But these measures only work if the threat is external. Once someone is inside, all our security theater becomes meaningless. The legend acknowledges a terrifying truth. The home is only as secure as the people and things already within it. The technology element of the legend has evolved over decades. In early versions, operators could trace calls, but it took time, hence the instruction to keep the caller talking. The babysitter had to buy time, creating dramatic tension. As technology changed, so did the legend. In 1980s versions, the call tracing was faster but not instant. In modern tellings, with cell phones and caller ID, the legend has to work around these complications. Sometimes the calls come from blocked numbers, sometimes they come as text messages, sometimes they're made through apps that disguise origins. The film When a Stranger Calls, 1979, was explicitly based on this urban legend, and its opening 20 minutes, featuring the babysitter receiving the threatening calls, is considered one of horror cinema's most effective sequences. The film made the legend even more widely known, creating a feedback loop where the movie reinforced the legend, and the legend's reputation drew audiences to the movie. A 2006 remake updated the technology, but kept the essential structure. The legend has gendered dimensions worth examining. Babysitting was, and largely remains, work performed by young women and girls, placing them in positions of responsibility and isolation. The legend reflects anxieties about these young women's vulnerability, both their physical vulnerability to attackers and their emotional vulnerability to the responsibility of caring for others' children. The babysitter is expected to be mature enough to handle childcare, but is still young enough to be targeted by predators. Parents' anxiety about leaving children with babysitters also infuses the legend. Entrusting your children to a young person, often someone barely into her teens, is an act of faith that has always generated worry. What if something happens? What if she's not vigilant enough? What if danger comes and she can't protect them? The legend channels these parental fears while simultaneously creating anxiety for babysitters themselves. The detail about the children varies in different versions, revealing different anxieties. In some tellings, the children are fine, asleep throughout the ordeal, never knowing danger was so close. This version emphasizes the babysitter's near miss and her heroism in escaping to get help. In darker versions, the children are already dead when police arrive, having been killed before the first phone call. This version is about the babysitter's failure to protect them, her guilt at being downstairs while murder happened above. The question, "Have you checked the children?" also works as social commentary on responsibility and surveillance. How often should someone check on sleeping children? What constitutes adequate supervision? The legend suggests that any moment of inattention might be the moment when disaster strikes. It's an impossible standard that nevertheless feels compelling. What if the one time you don't check is the time something terrible happens? The legend persists in modern times despite changes in technology and communication. Cell phones and home security systems should theoretically make this scenario obsolete, but the legend adapts. Now the calls might come through social media messages, or security cameras might show something moving upstairs, or smart home devices might relay sounds from the children's room. The underlying fear, that danger might already be inside your supposedly secure space, transcends technological solutions. He stands at the edge of the woods, impossibly tall and thin, wearing a dark suit. His face is blank, completely featureless, like someone erased all the details. His arms are too long, sometimes ending in hands, sometimes in dark tentacles that reach and wrap. Children see him first, are drawn to him. Then they disappear. Or they're found, but they're changed, speaking in whispers about the tall man who wants them to come to the woods. Slenderman represents something unique in urban legend history. A monster deliberately created as fiction who escaped into folklore, becoming real in the minds of believers and spawning genuine tragedy. His origin story reads like a case study in how modern legends form, spread, and take on lives independent of their creators' intentions. On June 10, 2009, a user named Victor Surge, real name Eric Knudsen, posted 2 doctored photographs to the Something Awful forums as part of a Create Paranormal Images contest. The photos showed groups of children with a tall, dark, faceless figure lurking in the background. Accompanying text presented these as discovered photographs, with disturbing backstories involving missing children and a mysterious entity. The images and concept immediately resonated. Within hours, other forum users were creating their own Slenderman content, building a collaborative mythology. He became associated with forests, with children, with surveillance footage and photographs where he appeared in the background. His appearance caused psychological disturbance, memory loss, and eventually abduction. The more you knew about him, the more dangerous he became. Looking at him directly was dangerous. Seeing him in your peripheral vision was worse. What Knudsen had done, perhaps without fully realizing it, was create a monster perfectly designed for the internet age. Slenderman's blank face and businesslike attire made him simultaneously generic and distinctive. His height and thinness made him easy to Photoshop into images. His nebulous powers and vague motivations allowed endless interpretation and expansion. And crucially, his mythology was collaborative and open source. Anyone could add to his legend, creating a sense of collective ownership. The Slenderman mythos exploded across the internet. YouTube series like Marble Hornets presented found footage-style horror stories featuring the character. Fan art, stories, and video game modifications proliferated. Slenderman appeared in photographs from around the world, always in the background, always watching. The collaborative nature of the creation meant that no single version was canonical, allowing the legend to evolve in multiple directions simultaneously. Slenderman combined elements from various existing folkloric entities. His appearance resembled the tall man from various cultural traditions. His blank face recalled the faceless ghost from Japanese horror. His association with children and forests echoed fairy tale monsters like the Pied Piper. His ability to appear in photographs borrowed from spirit photography traditions. He was a postmodern monster, assembled from recognizable parts but creating something new. The Slenderman video game, released in 2012, introduced him to an even wider audience. The simple concept, collect pages in a dark forest while avoiding Slenderman, who appears more frequently as you progress, created intense psychological horror. The game's success spawned countless imitations and cemented Slenderman's place in internet culture. But then something dark happened. On May 31, 2014, two 12-year-old girls in Waukesha, Wisconsin, lured their classmate into the woods and stabbed her 19 times. The victim survived, but during investigation, the attackers claimed they'd done it to prove themselves to Slenderman, whom they believed was real. They said they feared he would harm their families if they didn't kill for him. This tragedy transformed Slenderman from internet curiosity to national news story. Media coverage questioned whether online horror content could inspire real violence, whether the collaborative fiction had gone too far, whether children could distinguish between fictional characters and real entities. The case raised difficult questions about the influence of online culture, mental health, and the power of belief. The Waukesha case revealed that for some individuals, particularly young people with certain vulnerabilities, the line between collaborative fiction and believed reality had blurred. The girls involved reportedly suffered from undiagnosed mental health conditions that made them susceptible to intense belief in the Slenderman mythology. They'd consumed vast amounts of Slenderman content online, participating in communities where the line between playing along with the fiction and genuinely believing in it was deliberately ambiguous. This ambiguity is crucial to understanding how a created character became a legend. In online Slenderman communities, participants engaged in a kind of collective pretending that felt more real than simple fiction. They shared sightings, analyzed evidence, and behaved as if Slenderman existed while simultaneously knowing he'd been created on a forum. This simultaneous belief and disbelief created a liminal space where the character could become psychologically real without being factually real. Slenderman's evolution from deliberate creation to folklore legend happened with unprecedented speed. Traditional urban legends take years or decades to develop and spread. Slenderman went from non-existent to internationally known in months, from known character to believed entity within a few years. The Internet's capacity for rapid information spread and collaborative creation accelerated processes that previously took generations. The case also demonstrated how modern legends can have real-world consequences. Following the Waukesha stabbing, other incidents involving Slenderman were reported. A girl in Ohio attacked her mother while wearing a Slenderman mask. A teenager in Florida set fire to her family's home, citing Slenderman. While these cases were statistically rare among the millions who encountered the character, they showed that collaborative fiction could, for certain vulnerable individuals, become indistinguishable from reality. The Slenderman phenomenon reveals important aspects of how contemporary legends function. Unlike traditional urban legends passed through oral tradition, internet legends can be traced to specific origins. We know exactly when and how Slenderman was created. Yet this knowledge hasn't prevented him from functioning as a legend, from being believed, feared, and incorporated into cautionary tales about internet dangers and real-world violence. Slenderman also represents the democratization of monster making. Traditional monsters were created through cultural evolution, shaped by countless retellings until they achieved their final forms. Slenderman was created collaboratively but consciously, with participants actively adding to and refining his mythology. This process was visible, documented in forum posts and timestamps, yet it produced something that functioned psychologically like traditional folklore. The character's influence on popular culture has been significant. The 2018 Slenderman horror film attempted to capitalize on his recognition while navigating the tragedy associated with his name. HBO produced a documentary about the Waukesha case. Slenderman appears in video games, novels, and academic papers analyzing modern folklore. He's become a case study in how legends form in the digital age. What makes Slenderman particularly unsettling is the meta-level horror. A character created as fiction who inspired real violence, a collaborative story that some took as truth, a postmodern monster who became real through the power of belief and tragedy. He represents the potential darkness of shared imagination, the way collective storytelling can have unintended consequences. The Slenderman legend continues to evolve. New variations emerge, new sightings are reported, new stories are written. The character exists now in a strange space between acknowledged fiction and functioning legend. Most people know he was created on a forum, yet he's discussed and depicted in ways identical to traditional folkloric entities. He's simultaneously too new to be real folklore and too established to be dismissed as simple fiction. It's late evening and you hear a knock at your door. Through the peephole, you see two children standing on your porch, maybe 10 to 12 years old, wearing hoodies. Something feels wrong, though you can't immediately identify what. You open the door slightly, keeping the chain latched. "Can we come in?" one child asks. Their voice is flat, emotionless. "We need to use your phone. We need to come inside." "I don't think," you begin, but they interrupt. "You have to invite us in," the other child says. "Please let us come in." Something about their insistence unnerves you. You look more carefully at their faces, and that's when you see it. Their eyes are completely black. No whites, no irises, just solid black from edge to edge, like pools of ink. "Let us in," they say again, and now there's an edge to their voice, something between pleading and demanding. You have to let us in. Every instinct screams at you to close the door. You do, quickly locking it. You hear them on the porch for another moment, then silence. When you finally gather courage to look again, they're gone. You check your security camera footage later, but the recording is corrupted, showing only static for those exact minutes. This is the legend of the Black-Eyed Kids, or BKS, one of the most prevalent modern urban legends. Unlike most urban legends that can be traced back decades or centuries, the BK phenomenon is recent, with the first widely publicized account appearing in the late 1990s. Yet in the span of just 25 years, it's become a global legend with hundreds of reported encounters. The origin point is generally credited to journalist Brian Bethel, who shared his experience on a mailing list in 1998. Bethel claimed that while sitting in his parked car in Abilene, Texas, two children approached and asked for a ride home. He felt an overwhelming sense of dread and realized their eyes were completely black. He drove away, shaken by the encounter. Bethel's account was detailed, seemingly sincere, and his professional background as a journalist lent credibility. Following Bethel's story, other accounts began to surface. The reports shared common elements: children appearing at doors or car windows at night, requesting entry or rides, their unnaturally pale skin and outdated or nondescript clothing, their black eyes, the overwhelming feeling of dread they inspired, and their persistent insistence on being invited in, sometimes explicitly stating, "You have to invite us," or "You have to let us in." This last detail connects BKS to vampire mythology. Vampires in folklore traditionally cannot enter a home without invitation, a rule that appears across European vampire traditions and has become standard in modern vampire fiction. The BK legend either deliberately incorporates this element or unconsciously echoes it, suggesting these entities follow similar supernatural rules. Various theories attempt to explain what black-eyed children might be. Believers in the paranormal suggest they're demons, aliens, vampires, or interdimensional beings. Some connect them to government experiments or hybrid human-alien children. Skeptics point to contact lenses that can create the all-black eye effect, suggesting hoaxes or pranks. Others propose that the encounters are misperceptions, with normal children appearing sinister due to poor lighting, high anxiety, or suggestibility after hearing about the legend. The psychological impact of BEK encounters, whether real or imagined, is remarkably consistent. Witnesses describe overwhelming dread, a primal fear that seems disproportionate to the situation. This feeling often precedes the visual recognition of the black eyes, suggesting that something about the entire presentation, The monotone voices, the flat affect, the persistent demands, triggers deep survival instincts that something is wrong. Sleep paralysis has been proposed as an explanation for some BEK encounters, particularly those occurring when people are in bed or just waking. Sleep paralysis often involves hallucinations of intruders and overwhelming fear, and the paralysis victim's inability to move or call for help could be reinterpreted as being unable to let them in. However, this doesn't explain encounters occurring in fully awake circumstances, like answering the door or sitting in a car. The modern nature of the legend means it's adapted to contemporary contexts in interesting ways. BEKs allegedly appear in security camera footage that becomes corrupted or glitched. They're supposedly seen in background of photographs, their black eyes visible upon closer inspection. They contact potential victims through social media or text messages, always requesting to meet in person or visit homes. The legend evolves with technology, maintaining relevance to current anxieties. The child form of these entities is psychologically significant. Children are supposed to be vulnerable and innocent, deserving of help and protection. The legend perverts this expectation, making the child form a disguise for something malevolent. This creates a moral dilemma. Our instinct to help children conflicts with our instinct to protect ourselves from threat. The BEK legend exploits this tension, making the correct choice to deny entry feel morally uncomfortable even while rationally justified. The black eyes detail is particularly effective as a marker of otherness. Eyes are central to human recognition and communication. We're programmed to look at eyes, to read emotion and intention from them. Completely black eyes eliminate all the cues we use to understand each other. No pupil dilation indicating arousal or interest, no sclera showing health, no iris color. Black eyes transform the face into a mask, something that looks human but isn't, triggering the uncanny valley response, where near-human entities feel more disturbing than obviously non-human ones. Interestingly, black sclera contact lenses are commercially available, used in alternative fashion and cosplay. Some skeptics suggest that the BEK legend has inspired pranks where people wear these contacts to frighten others. If such pranks occur, they create a feedback loop. The legend inspires the prank creates new encounters. These encounters reinforce the legend's credibility. Reality and legend become mutually reinforcing. The geographical spread of BEK reports is global, with accounts from the United States, United Kingdom, Australia, and other English-speaking countries primarily, but also some reports from non-English-speaking regions. This distribution suggests either that the phenomenon is real and worldwide, or more likely, that the legend spread through English-language internet communities, and then translated into other cultures. Some researchers have noted similarities between BEK encounters and much older folklore about changelings and fairy children. In Celtic folklore, fairies would sometimes appear as children to trick humans into various compromises. These fairy children would have unusual features and would often seek to be taken into homes. The BEK legend might represent a modern updating of these traditional beliefs, adapted to contemporary contexts but maintaining the underlying structure. The legend's persistence suggests it fulfills psychological needs. In an era of increasing social disconnection, the BEK legend warns against the dangers of letting strangers into our homes and lives. In a time of anxiety about children's safety, it flips the narrative, making children the source of danger rather than its victims. In a digital age where we're never sure what's real, BEK encounters reported online could be true experiences, sincere delusions, creative fiction, or deliberate hoaxes. And this uncertainty itself becomes part of the legend's power. The rules are specific. You must be alone in the building, or at least alone in the elevator. You press the buttons in a precise sequence: 4th floor, 2nd floor, 6th floor, 2nd floor again, 10th floor, 5th floor. The elevator must stop at each floor, but you must not get out. If someone tries to enter, you must not let them. On the 5th floor, a woman might enter. She's not human, though she looks it. Don't look at her. Don't speak to her. Press the button for the 1st floor. If the elevator goes up instead of down, you've succeeded. You're no longer in our world. When you reach the 10th floor and exit, you'll be in the other world. A dimension that looks like ours but empty, with red crosses visible from windows, where you're completely alone. You can explore, but you must return the same way you came. If you don't follow the exit procedure correctly, you'll be trapped there forever. If the woman from the 5th floor followed you out, you've already lost. This is the elevator game, also called the elevator to another world or Korean elevator game. An urban legend and ritual that gained popularity in the early 2010s through online forums and YouTube videos. Unlike passive urban legends that you hear about, the elevator game is participatory. It provides explicit instructions for those brave or foolish enough to attempt reaching another dimension. The legend's origins are murky, but appear to trace back to Korean internet forums in the early 2000s. South Korea's elevator culture provides context for this legend's emergence. High-rise apartment buildings are extremely common, elevators are ubiquitous, and people spend significant time in these small, transitional spaces. The ritual likely evolved from existing Korean folklore about liminal spaces and spirit worlds, adapted to modern urban architecture. The elevator game represents a category of internet-era legends, sometimes called ritual games or challenge rituals. These include the Midnight Game, the Three Kings Game, One Man Hide and Seek, and others. What distinguishes them from traditional urban legends is their instructional format. They tell you not just what happens, but exactly how to make it happen. They transform readers from passive audiences into potential participants. The specific button sequence varies slightly between versions, but the underlying logic remains consistent. You're confusing the elevator, making it go places it shouldn't, creating a glitch in reality. The requirement that you be alone prevents witnesses and help. The prohibition against letting others enter suggests that other people would ground you in ordinary reality, preventing the transition. The mysterious woman on the 5th floor serves as both guardian and test. She's the threshold between worlds. Who is this woman? Descriptions vary. Some accounts say she's a spirit trapped between worlds. Others suggest she's the elevator itself given form, or a demon who preys on people attempting the ritual. Most agree that making eye contact or speaking with her is dangerous. In some versions, she'll ask if you're going somewhere or try to convince you to exit early. Resisting her is crucial to completing the ritual. The red cross detail that supposedly marks the other world's windows is particularly interesting. In some versions, the red cross is a red cross on black background. In others, it's simply a reddish glow. This marker serves as confirmation that the transition succeeded. The world looks similar to ours, but contains this distinguishing feature. The emptiness is equally important. No people, no movement, just the same buildings and spaces, but devoid of life. It's urban isolation taken to metaphysical extremes. The psychological appeal of the elevator game relates to feelings of urban alienation. Modern city life often involves spending time alone in transitional spaces. Elevators, hallways, subway cars. These moments can feel disconnected from real life, neither here nor there, suspended between destinations. The elevator game takes this ordinary alienation and imagines it becoming literal. What if those transitional spaces could transition you somewhere else entirely? Elevators are already somewhat unsettling spaces. You're suspended in a small box, trusting machinery and engineering, moving through space you can't see. Elevator anxiety is common enough that it's recognized by psychologists. Claustrophobia, fear of heights, fear of mechanical failure, social anxiety about being trapped in close quarters with strangers. Elevators trigger multiple anxiety types. The elevator game channels these existing fears into a supernatural framework. The ritual's structure creates its own form of psychological manipulation. Following the button sequence requires attention and memory, creating a mild trance state. The anticipation builds with each floor. Will something happen? Will the woman appear? The extended duration. Some versions suggest the full ritual takes 15 to 20 minutes, maintains heightened alertness and anxiety. If you're suggestible and alone in an elevator for this long, following cryptic instructions, your perception might begin to distort. Reports of people attempting the elevator game fill YouTube and paranormal forums. Most describe nothing happening beyond feeling scared. Some report strange occurrences. Elevators behaving oddly, lights flickering, sounds that shouldn't be there, feelings of being watched. A few claim to have entered the other world, describing the experience in vivid detail. The same building but empty and wrong, with that distinctive red glow. Silence so complete it felt oppressive, and overwhelming desire to return immediately. These accounts are likely a combination of suggestion, misperception, and creative fiction. An anxious person alone in an elevator, primed to expect unusual experiences, will interpret ambiguous stimuli as significant. Elevators do sometimes malfunction in minor ways. Lights flicker, strange sounds occur, button presses don't register correctly. These mundane glitches become evidence of supernatural transition when interpreted through the ritual's framework. The legend gained broader attention in 2013 following the death of Alyssa Lamb at the Cecil Hotel in Los Angeles. Security footage showed Lamb behaving strangely in an elevator, pressing multiple buttons, stepping in and out, gesturing as if talking to someone, pressing herself against the wall. She was later found dead in the hotel's water tank under mysterious circumstances. While the death was ultimately ruled accidental, related to mental health issues, online communities noted similarities between Lamb's behavior and the elevator game ritual. This connection, however speculative, reinforced the legend's credibility for believers. The elevator game has spawned variations and related rituals. Some versions add additional steps or alternate button sequences. Others specify particular buildings or times that supposedly work better. There are related rituals involving stairs, basement levels, or specific architectural features. The basic concept, using mundane building infrastructure to access supernatural spaces, proved adaptable to various contexts. Buildings have responded to the legend in different ways. Some apartment complexes and office buildings have posted warnings against attempting the ritual, citing safety concerns and surveillance evidence that it disrupts normal operations. Security guards report finding people alone in elevators pushing buttons in patterns, often late at night. Whether these people are attempting the ritual seriously or making videos for social media, they create disruption and potential liability. The legend reflects several contemporary anxieties. It channels fears about urban isolation. The sense that even in densely populated cities, we're fundamentally alone. It expresses anxiety about the liminal spaces of modern life, the non-places we pass through without really inhabiting. And it plays on the unsettling possibility that the structures we trust, elevators that safely transport us between floors, might not be entirely under our control. Every major city has its underground, tunnels and pipes and passages beneath the streets, carrying away what we prefer not to think about. And every major city seems to have its legends about what lives down there in the darkness. But New York City's underground legend is particularly specific, particularly persistent, and particularly impossible to completely dismiss. There are alligators living in the sewers, colonies of them, pale and blind from generations in darkness, waiting in the tunnels beneath our feet. The legend suggests that during the 1930s, wealthy New Yorkers who'd vacationed in Florida brought back baby alligators as exotic pets. When these cute hatchlings grew too large and dangerous, their owners flushed them down toilets. The alligators survived, adapted, and bred in the warm, food-rich environment of the sewer system. Over decades, they evolved into a separate subspecies. Albino from lack of sunlight, blind from living in perpetual darkness, but thriving in their subterranean kingdom. This legend has remarkable staying power despite being thoroughly debunked by city officials, zoologists, and countless sewer workers. The New York City Department of Environmental Protection has repeatedly stated that alligators cannot survive in the sewers. The temperature would be too cold for reptiles for much of the year. The flowing water would sweep away baby alligators, and the environment couldn't support the prey population necessary to feed alligator colonies. Sewer workers who spend their careers in these tunnels report never having seen alligators. Yet the legend persists, and interestingly, it has a kernel of historical truth. In 1935, the New York Times reported that teenagers found an 8-foot alligator in the sewers at East 123rd Street and attempted to rescue it with a clothesline. When the animal proved aggressive, they killed it with shovels. This single documented incident became the seed from which the legend grew. There have been other confirmed alligator encounters in New York, but not in sewers. In 2001, an alligator named Damon was caught in a Queens Park lake. In 2010, a baby alligator was found in the Central Park Lake. These were almost certainly illegal pets that had been released or escaped, not sewer dwellers. But each new alligator sighting in New York, regardless of location, reinforces the legend's credibility for believers. The 1959 book, The World Beneath the City, by Robert Daly, featured a chapter on the sewer alligator legend, treating it as plausible and giving it broader publicity. In 1973, Thomas Pynchon's novel Gravity's Rainbow included sewer alligators as a subplot, further embedding the legend in popular culture. The 1980 horror novel Alligator by Shelley Katz, adapted into a film, depicted mutated sewer alligators terrorizing Chicago. Each cultural reference reinforced the legend's staying power. Why does this particular legend resonate so strongly? On one level, it's simply a good monster story. Predators lurking beneath civilization's thin veneer, nature refusing to be entirely controlled by human engineering. But it also expresses specific anxieties about urban infrastructure, disposal of unwanted things, and the consequences of thoughtless actions. The alligator's origin story, wealthy people bringing back exotic pets they couldn't handle and disposing of them irresponsibly, contains social commentary. It reflects anxieties about class privilege and environmental irresponsibility. The rich bring exotic problems from their travels and literally flush them into the infrastructure that everyone shares. The sewers, where waste from all classes mingles, become a space where privileged mistakes have communal consequences. The legend also expresses unease about what we don't see or think about in daily life. Sewers carry away waste, and we prefer not to contemplate where it goes or what happens to it. The suggestion that something alive and dangerous could be thriving in this ignored space taps into guilt and anxiety about what we'd rather forget. We flush away problems, literally and metaphorically, assuming they'll disappear. The sewer alligator legend suggests that flushed-away problems might grow, might survive, might even thrive in ways that could eventually threaten us. There's also a Darwinian edge to the legend. The alligators supposedly evolved to fit their environment, losing pigmentation and eyesight they no longer needed, becoming uniquely adapted to sewer life. This plays on both fascination with and fear of evolution, suggesting that life will always find a way, that even the most hostile environments might harbor adapted creatures. Its nature as unstoppable force, refusing to be contained by human design. The albino aspect of the legend is particularly interesting. Albinism creates an almost supernatural appearance. The pure white scales, the red or pink eyes when vision is retained, Albino alligators exist in reality and are indeed striking and somewhat unsettling to look at. The legend uses this real phenomenon to make the sewer alligators seem more otherworldly, more like mutants than simply relocated creatures. Related urban legends appear in other cities. Los Angeles supposedly has crocodiles in storm drains. Paris has similar legends about the catacombs. London's Victorian sewers are rumored to house various creatures. Chicago, after the horror movie, developed its own sewer alligator mythology. The universal pattern suggests that every large city needs its underground monster legend, and alligators or similar reptiles often fill this role. The legend has practical consequences. Exotic pet ownership of alligators and crocodiles is now heavily regulated or banned in many jurisdictions, partly because of fears that irresponsible owners might release them into local waterways. While sewer colonization is implausible, alligators can survive in temperate waterways for surprising periods, and released pets have established populations in unexpected places. The legend's exaggeration of a real problem has perhaps helped address that problem through increased regulation. Actual surveys of sewer systems in major cities have found various unexpected creatures. Rats naturally, but also fish, eels, turtles, and in rare cases, snakes. Sewers connect to waterways, and aquatic creatures sometimes find their way into the system. But no established populations of large reptiles have been found. The environment is simply too hostile for long-term survival of creatures that require warmth and substantial food sources. The legend persists partly through the impossibility of complete disproof. Sewer systems are vast, complex, and largely inaccessible to public verification. When officials say there are no alligators, believers can respond that officials wouldn't necessarily know. The sewers are too extensive to survey completely, and authorities might cover up any findings to prevent panic. The hidden, inaccessible nature of sewers makes them perfect incubators for legend. Sewer workers are folk heroes in the legend, portrayed as tough individuals who know the truth about what's down there but keep silent, either because no one would believe them or because they've been warned not to talk. This adds an element of conspiracy to the legend. The authorities know but aren't telling us. This conspiracy aspect makes the legend more resilient against official denials, which can be reinterpreted as cover-ups rather than truth-telling. The sewer alligator legend ultimately represents our complex relationship with urban infrastructure. We depend on massive, complex systems that most of us never see and barely understand. We trust that they work, that they safely contain and transport the things we want removed from our immediate environment. But this trust is paired with unease about what happens in spaces we can't access or monitor. The legend gives form to that unease, suggesting that the unseen infrastructure might harbor surprises, that our disposal systems might not be quite as final as we assume. In the late 1940s, Soviet researchers sealed 5 political prisoners in an airtight chamber. For 30 days, these men would be exposed to an experimental stimulant gas designed to eliminate the need for sleep. Researchers monitored them through microphones and observation windows, watching as days passed without rest. For the first few days, the subjects talked among themselves, discussed their hopes for freedom if the experiment succeeded. By day 5, they became paranoid and stopped talking to each other, whispering only to the microphones, trying to turn the researchers against their fellow prisoners. By day 9, one subject began screaming. He ran to the chamber door, screaming for hours until his vocal cords shredded. The others didn't react. Then one by one, they fell silent, completely silent. No talking, no movement visible through the observation windows. Researchers assumed they'd died, but monitoring equipment showed they were alive, heart rates elevated, oxygen consumption increasing. On day 15, researchers used the intercom. "We're opening the chamber to test the microphone. Step away from the door and lie down. You will be shot if you don't comply. A single phrase came back, "We no longer want to be freed." When the chamber finally opened, the sight inside was beyond comprehension. The subjects had torn off their own flesh, exposing muscle and bone. They'd eaten their own organs, yet somehow remained alive, laughing and begging for the gas to be turned back on. When soldiers tried to remove them, they fought violently, possessed of impossible strength. One subject, when taken off the gas, died immediately. Another tore open his abdomen and pulled out his intestines, laughing as he did so. The final captive, strapped down and screaming as they removed him from the gas, managed to say, "Have you forgotten so easily? We are you. We are the madness that lurks within you all, begging to be free at every moment in your deepest animal mind. We are what you hide from in your beds every night. We are what you sedate into silence and paralysis when you go to the nocturnal haven where we cannot tread." This story, known as the Russian sleep experiment, is not real. It's a creepypasta, internet horror fiction designed to disturb and unsettle. Written by an anonymous author and first posted to a creepypasta wiki around 2010, it's entirely fictional. Yet it's become one of the most persistent modern urban legends, with countless people believing it to be a leaked document from actual Soviet experiments. The legend reveals how internet-age stories can achieve legendary status despite being demonstrably false. The story's effectiveness comes from its clinical presentation. It reads like a leaked government report or declassified document, complete with specific dates, procedural details, and scientific observations. This documentary style lends false credibility, making readers feel they're accessing forbidden information rather than reading deliberate fiction. The language imitates the dry, detached tone of actual experimental documentation, creating psychological distance from the horror being described. The horror itself is extreme, pushing far beyond plausibility. Human bodies don't function the way described. People cannot survive the injuries depicted, cannot remain conscious after such trauma, cannot display superhuman strength. The story ventures into supernatural territory while maintaining its pseudoscientific framework, creating a unique blend of body horror and existential dread. Why do people believe it's real? Several factors contribute. The story is specific about location, time period, and circumstance. This specificity feels factual. The historical context is plausible. The Soviet Union did conduct unethical human experiments, as did many nations during and after World War II. The story exploits real historical horrors to gain credibility. The story also taps into existing beliefs about secretive government experiments. MKULTRA, the CIA's actual mind control program that used LSD and other methods on unwitting subjects, was real and documented. The Tuskegee syphilis study, where black men were deliberately left untreated to study disease progression, was real. Unit 731, where Japanese researchers conducted horrific experiments on prisoners during World War II, was real. These documented atrocities make fictional experiments seem plausible by comparison. If governments did those terrible things, why not this? The Internet's role in spreading the Russian sleep experiment legend demonstrates how modern legends propagate. The story was posted to creepypasta websites, explicitly labeled as fiction. But as it spread through social media, forums, and YouTube videos, that context was stripped away. People encountered the story without the "this is fiction" framing, receiving it as leaked information or suppressed history. Once that reframing occurred, the story began functioning as legend rather than acknowledged fiction. YouTube played a particularly important role. Numerous channels created videos presenting the Russian sleep experiment as fact, using ominous narration, stock footage of Soviet facilities, and dramatic recreations. These videos accumulated millions of views, with comment sections full of people debating the story's authenticity. Some commenters pointed out it was fiction. Others insisted they'd found evidence or confirmation from unnamed sources. The debate itself became part of the legend's spread. The story's viral success inspired countless variations and extensions. Fan art depicted the subjects in various states of mutilation. Short films attempted to visualize the story. Video games incorporated elements of the concept. These creative responses blurred the line between engaging with fiction and perpetuating a legend, with creators sometimes unclear or deliberately ambiguous about whether they believed the story was real. The philosophical content of the final subject's speech resonates particularly strongly. The idea that sleeplessness might reveal some fundamental madness within human nature, that the thing we become without sleep represents our true selves, touches on genuine anxieties about consciousness and identity. The suggestion that sleep itself is a form of sedation, protecting us from what we really are, transforms a biological necessity into a metaphysical question. This gives the story depth beyond simple gore, making it memorable and discussion-worthy. Sleep deprivation research is real, though nothing like what the story depicts. Actual experiments have shown that extended sleep deprivation causes hallucinations, cognitive impairment, paranoia, and eventually death. The longest verified period without sleep is 11 days, achieved by Randy Gardner in 1964 under medical supervision. He experienced significant psychological effects, but recovered fully afterward. No stimulant gas exists that can prevent sleep indefinitely, and the biological necessity of sleep is absolute. The body will eventually sleep or die. The story's popularity reflects contemporary anxieties about sleep and consciousness. Modern society increasingly treats sleep as optional or negotiable, with technology enabling 24/7 connectivity and productivity culture treating sleep as wasted time. We consume caffeine and other stimulants to extend waking hours. The story takes this cultural tendency to its nightmarish logical conclusion. What if we succeeded in eliminating sleep entirely? The answer it provides is horror. Sleep is protective, necessary, fundamental to our humanity. The legend has been debunked countless times. Fact-checking websites have traced its origin to creepypasta sites. Historians have pointed out anachronisms and impossibilities in the story. Medical professionals have explained why the physiological details are nonsense. Yet these debunkings exist alongside millions of people sharing the story as real, or at least potentially real, demonstrating that in the internet age, facts and fiction can coexist indefinitely. This coexistence is key to understanding modern urban legends. Unlike traditional legends that spread through oral tradition and evolved gradually, internet legends like the Russian sleep experiment exist simultaneously in multiple versions and interpretations. It's fiction on creepypasta sites, legend on social media, fact in some YouTube videos, and ironic meme in other contexts. The story exists in a superposition of truth states, with different audiences interpreting it differently based on where and how they encountered it. The Russian sleep experiment also demonstrates how modern legends can be deliberately created and still function as legends. Traditional urban legends emerge organically through repeated tellings and cultural transmission. Internet legends can be written intentionally, posted publicly, and still achieve legendary status by losing their context and being received as true. The author's intent becomes irrelevant once the story escapes its original framing. This has important implications for how we understand truth and belief in the digital age. When any story can be presented in documentary style, when videos can be edited to appear authentic, when enough people sharing something makes it seem credible regardless of factuality, the line between legend and reality becomes increasingly difficult to navigate. The Russian sleep experiment succeeds as a legend not despite being provably false, but almost because of it. The story is too extreme to be real, yet people believe it anyway, which itself becomes part of the legend's power. The story also raises questions about the ethics of horror fiction. Should creators be concerned when their deliberately fictional stories are believed as fact. The Russian sleep experiment's author remains anonymous and has never clarified their intentions. But the stories spread as believed legend has arguably caused harm. It reinforces inaccurate ideas about sleep and consciousness, promotes distrust in scientific research, and adds to the misinformation ecosystem. Yet it's also a remarkably effective piece of horror fiction that clearly resonates with readers' fears and interests. Some defenders of the story argue that whether it's real misses the point, that urban legends have always functioned through ambiguous truth status, that the emotional and psychological truth of the story matters more than its factual accuracy. The Russian sleep experiment, they suggest, expresses real fears about the loss of humanity, the dangers of unchecked authority, and the darkness that might lurk within consciousness. These themes have value regardless of whether Soviet researchers actually conducted such experiments. The legend continues to evolve. New variations appear, some claiming to provide additional details or newly declassified information. Some versions attempt to make the story more plausible by reducing the extreme elements. Others double down on the horror, adding even more disturbing details. The story has achieved enough cultural penetration that it's now referenced in other contexts, with people making Russian sleep experiment jokes or using it as a metaphor for extreme sleep deprivation. Tonight, we've traveled through shadows both old and new, from lonely highways where phantom hitchhikers search for home, to sealed chambers where fictional horrors feel terrifyingly real. These stories will continue to evolve, to adapt to new technologies and new fears. New legends are being born right now in online forums and social media threads, spreading through the same psychological mechanisms that have always made humans tell scary stories in the dark. We'll keep sharing them, keep embellishing them, keep wondering what if. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the darker corners of folklore and internet legend. If you're already drifting off, then our mission is complete. But if you're still awake, perhaps another deep dive through one of our previous episodes will carry you gently into slumber. Until we meet again in these quiet hours, may your doors be locked, your mirrors be clear, and may you sleep soundly knowing that most monsters exist only in the stories we tell.